What is going on? This is Mark Reel Jr., the Fathers Rights Attorney, and you're watching another episode of the Fathers Rights Playbook. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about three key concepts, three key areas that military men need to focus on in their divorce. And to discuss it with me is attorney out of our San Diego office, Sandy Meade. Sandy, how we doing?
Fabulous, thank you. And you?
Awesome. So in San Diego, we have offices out in the Coachella Valley. There's base out there. We have March Air Force Base in the Inland Empire. And military divorce is fundamentally different. And we were talking off camera about really three key areas that men need to be aware of when going through divorce when they are active duty. And so I'll start with the first one, and that is child support orders from the military versus child support orders in family court.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the differences?
Absolutely. The most important thing for a military member to know is your court case in the military court, their support orders are always higher than San Diego Superior Courts. So you want to get into family court as soon as possible and get your support order set in family court, not through the courts in the through the government. Because even if it's just your CO, that CO is going to give you a higher support number than you're going to pay in family court. So get it down lower as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic, and that's kind of across all areas of a divorce or all areas of a custody situation. Is the military can step in, and in my experience, I think it's changing, but they are not so friendly to the active duty members, men or women. Usually the spouse is the one who comes out best when the military is involved.
Yes, absolutely. And they also know that all they have to do is make that command call. So it's really important to get your protection in early and fast so that you are in a good place. And usually family court is going to be better for the military employee.
Yeah, definitely. And then being here in San Diego, number two on that is obviously the Navy provides legal advice. They have the office there on base that you can go to. And a lot of times we see some discrepancies on their understanding of family law, specifically when it comes to retirement with military.
Yeah, that's a big one, and I hear this all the time with my military employees. They'll come in, or even if they're on the other side, if it's a military employee on the other side, there's one misconception about the 10-year rule. It's very popular. You have to serve for 10 years in order to get retirement, but they think that if you're not married for 10 years that you don't have to pay any of your retirement to the other side. And what the 10-year rule really is if you get 10 years in and you're 10 years married, the military is going to pay out that retirement to the other side automatically. But if it's less than 10 years, for whatever reason, I think that they believe through the VA, through the military tribunal, they think that they're not going to have to pay anything. They're still going to have to divide that community property interest. It's just not going to be automatic. They're going to have to do an extra step and get an order in place that allows the military to pay that out to the other party. And that's the big difference.
California community property laws still apply.
Always, yes. They're going to trump anything that the military is telling you on the law. The case is going to be in the Superior Court, and they have the final say. The only difference is that DFAS will only pay in certain ways if you have certain orders, and that's the big difference. And we know that, so we know how to handle those. A
few military clients. And so the last one, this is probably the most impactful, and it's the scariest one to go through. And that is when there's allegations of domestic violence while you're an active duty military member. So guy comes to you and says, hey, I've been accused of domestic violence, and they're on active duty based out of one of the bases here in San Diego County. What's the advice you're going to give them?
Don't get in that situation, first of all. It's really easy to get in that situation because there's a different standard of law in criminal courts versus family courts. There's a very low threshold to prove a DV, which is domestic violence or domestic violence restraining order. And the ramifications are extreme for military in particular.
Yeah.
Not only can it destroy a person's career entirely just right from the get-go, you can actually get dishonorable discharge if you're found guilty of domestic violence.
Yeah.
You can also, even if you're not discharged, you can lose your ability to promote up. You can get stuck and be kept down when everybody else gets promoted ahead of you.
Yeah.
There's just things like that will happen, and it's going to affect everything. And not only that, you're also being affected in your life just in general. So it's going to affect custody and visitation. It's going to affect timeshare, which also affects your support numbers, and it just keeps going. So having your career end because of a domestic violence restraining order is the most severe, and you just don't want to go there.
And the thing is, in my experience, the usually what happens is usually the CO is the first one to get involved. Usually, and we'll use it in our case. We represent men. I'm sure it happens both ways, but the wife will go to your CO and say, "I'm being abused," and it starts from there. And I think for me, my biggest piece of advice is you need to immediately seek professional help. We do this every single day, working through these restraining orders.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you this, the biggest mistakes men make are usually between allegation and actually getting their day in court. It's not usually what happens before the allegation. It's usually what happens between allegation and us actually getting you in front of a judge.
Exactly. And that's a good point, too, because a lot of times what happens is there's a presumption that you are guilty of domestic violence if you do any type of contact, even third-party contact, with somebody when there's a temporary restraining order in place. And that can be just the most damaging to you in your defense because you can't get past that.
Yeah.
So if you talk
statutorily.
Exactly.
If you violate a TRO, the courts have to presume that you can't follow an order anyway, and they can grant that restraining order even if none of the allegations are true.
Exactly. And the first instinct is to call somebody up and say, "Hey, can you make this go away? You didn't really mean to file that, did you?"
Yeah.
And now you're in violation. Or talk to a family member or a friend and say, "Hey, tell them to get rid of this because it's ridiculous."
Yeah.
And if I do it, you're not going to get in trouble because I can negotiate those things. But if you do it, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So that's all the difference in the world, is getting an attorney on there fast and letting us tell you what you can and can't do and keep you safe.
Well, I think the scary piece, you mentioned custody, and a lot of times with military men, it's like you may be moving around, you may be stationed in different areas of the country, you may not live after you're out of the military in the area you're living in. If you have that restraining order, she's going to have a lot more freedom in terms of moving. Maybe you guys are originally from Maryland or Texas, and you've been in California for 15 years now. Well, if there's that restraining order, it's going to make it a lot easier for her to go to the courts and say, "Hey, I need to go back to Texas. Hey, I need to go back to Maryland." Then all of a sudden, you may be 15 years in, hoping to get full retirement at 20 years, and you're going to have to your kid on a regular basis.
Exactly. And there's a 3044 presumption, which is Family Code 3044. If you have a domestic violence restraining order against you, you're presumed to be an unfit parent for 5 years. And particularly as long as that restraining order is in place, you can get past that presumption, and that's what we try to focus on, how to show that you've rehabilitated and get you to the point where the judges want to give you that more custodial time, even change custody into your hands in some instances. But if you don't follow the steps and do what you need to do, you can't get there. And it's not intuitive, it's not simple and easy. You have to know what those things are. And we like to teach them what to do and how to do it to make sure that they're ready and protected. And hopefully avoid it all entirely.
Definitely. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for your time today. And to all our listeners and viewers, I'm assuming if you're still with us, you're a military man. Hopefully these 3 tips can help you navigate your issues, your problems in family court. And to everyone watching, we'll see you guys again next week with another episode of the Fathers Rights Playbook.
And thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you.